Our forefathers kept the Torah before it was given, and they studied Torah. Avraham Avinu gave Meiser to Melchizedek, gave a tithe to Melchizedek. Rivka watered Eliezer's camels. Avraham Avinu was well known for his hospitality. From the days of Avraham Avinu, the Jews kept Brit Milah, circumcision. And they would keep Shabbos, though in certain ways their spiritual gain was limited. Yet Hashem chose to give the Torah at Sinai. Let's try to find out why. Yitro, Matan Torah, Mishpatim. Didn't Bnei Yisrael already observe the customs handed down to them by our forefathers? Didn't this occur before Sinai? Didn't they study Torah even before it was given? If so, what actually was the big deal about the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai? We learned that the Avos kept the Torah even before it was formally given. Not only was Avraham commanded to perform a bris milah, and not only was the prohibition of Gid Hanasha, the sciatic nerve, observed since Yaakov was struck by the angel, but there is also clear testimony that our forefathers studied Torah regularly. As it says in Masechet Yoma, from the days of our forefathers, the study of Torah never ceased. Furthermore, the Torah relates that Yaakov had sent his son Yehuda to put up a learning academy in Egypt before his own arrival with the rest of the family. Moreover, even in Egypt, just as they were about to be redeemed, the Jews were given 2 additional mitzvos, the Pesach sacrifice and circumcision. May I add that although Avraham was already commanded to have his children circumcised, there was a weakness in its continued observance. We do understand that this was difficult under the oppression in Egypt, and this is why the command was reinforced to make the Jews worthy of eating the Korban Pesach just as they were about to be redeemed. And later, when they were in Marah, according to one opinion, it was there that they were given the mitzvahs mentioned in Parshas Mishpatim. This opinion is based on the words, Sham sam lo chok u'mishpat v'sham nisau. There he gave them statute and law, and there he tested them. The word nisau is based on the root nasa, which also implies elevation. This illustrates that already there in Marah, Hashem uplifted Bnei Yisrael spiritually by granting them additional mitzvahs. According to the Ramban, even while they were still classified as Bnei Noach, the Jews were responsible for observing the 7 Noachide laws. One of these laws, called Dinim, includes laws about theft and fraud, oppression and wages, responsibility over items entrusted to people, seduction and coercion, damages, injury, loans, laws of business dealings, and more. Since the dawn of history, every society must establish laws in order to function. And if one asks, what about Sodom? Didn't they enforce local laws? The answer is yes, but they were corrupt laws. They were laws that denied the poor the right to exist. Yet even societies with legal systems do not always apply them justly, as seen in the following 2 cases. In the 1920s, Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti immigrated from Italy to the United States. They were poor, yet were locally known as outspoken critics of local government's discrimination against immigrants. At the time, a factory treasurer and guard were murdered in Massachusetts, and although there was no evidence against them, these 2 immigrants were accused and convicted. And despite protests from all over the world, they were executed in 1927. Sadly, even in Jewish communities with courts, Batei Din, failures occurred. In the 18th century, in an Eastern European Jewish community, a poor man named Yaakov was accused of stealing from a wealthy merchant. Now this wealthy merchant had good connections with the judges of the local Beit Din, he made sure they would rule in his favor, although there was no real evidence that Yaakov committed the crime. As expected, the poor witnesses who came to testify on Yaakov's behalf were ignored, and as a result, Yaakov was found guilty and was fined with more than he could afford to pay. Consequently, he was humiliated in public and found himself a stranger in his familiar surroundings. He lost his job and his family suffered badly. There's a Hasidic saying that though human laws emerge from human communal life, godly laws create and maintain communal life. Going back to the Jews' Torah observance before Sinai, what did they actually follow? Besides the 7 Noahide laws, our forefathers passed down to their descendants the laws of Torah that they themselves observed, though there is some controversy about the extent and format of their observance. Chazal even say that the forefathers kept the entire Torah before it was formally given. However, if a Torah law conflicted with a Noahide command, the Noahide law took priority. For example, although Torah prohibits marrying 2 sisters, Yaakov had to marry Rachel after Leah because he had promised her, since the Noahide law demands keeping promises. Beyond the laws themselves, the Jews also stood out in their daily conduct. As we say in the Haggadah, they were mitzuyanim sham. They were set apart by preserving their names, language, and dress. Yet those that were considered absolutely wicked perished during the plague of darkness. These were the ones who strayed far from Jewish tradition, fully submerged in Egyptian impurity and spiritual darkness. But even within this darkness, a light shone. A light that shone through by the extraordinary kindness of those who remain spiritually redeemable. According to the Medrash, each family of 54 children adopted the children of 5 additional families of those whose parents had perished. This brought the total of 270 children per household, an act of kindness that is absolutely unbelievable. So if they already had laws, traditions, and even divine commands like Pesach and circumcision, why were the revelations at Sinai necessary with such pomp and ceremony? From all this we see that the revelations at Har Sinai transform the essence of mitzvos, even those already practiced. Mitzvos fall into 3 categories: chukim, which are laws beyond reason; edot, testimonials like Shabbos that testifies the fact that Hashem created the world in 6 days and then rested on the 7th day; and Mishpatim, ethical laws that human reason would require even without the Torah. But Matan Torah redefined everything in regards to all 3 types, which is also impactful for generations to come, since according to tradition, all the souls of all generations were present there. So what was actually new? At Sinai, Hashem removed the barrier between heaven and earth. The spiritual came down, and the human was lifted up. To understand this further, we ought to note the order of the Parshiot. Yitro comes first, describing the revelation at Mount Sinai and the giving of the 10 Commandments, and Yitro is followed by Mishpatim, which opens with the words, Ve'ele ha-mishpatim. Rashi explains, just as the earlier commandments were given at Sinai, so too these laws were given at Sinai. Chazal explained that Mishpatim, even though they seem logical, are just as much from Hashem as Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Keeping them isn't only about being moral, it's about serving Hashem. Parsha Yitro represents chukim, Hashem coming down to Mount Sinai. It was such a powerful spiritual moment that the physical world seemed to stop. As Chazal say, no cow mooed and no bird chirped. The people at the foot of the mountain moved back in terror, and according to another description, they could see sounds and hear sights, for when spirituality takes over, the physical world's limits disappear. Regarding chukim, for example, the Rambam explains, when you hold back from buying a cheeseburger, you can say, I don't understand why, but I won't buy it since Hashem commanded us not to mix meat and milk. But if you think, I want to harm this person and only stop because it's forbidden, this shows you have a flawed character and you need to work on yourself. Yet at Sinai, the theme of unquestioning acceptance, Nasa v'nishma, was even deeper. As it is written, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, implying that in the meeting of heaven and earth, Hashem said, I'll begin. There was thunder, lightning, and terror. The souls of the Jews left their bodies until angels restored them. Why? Because of the overwhelming holiness of this unprecedented revelation. And just like prophets would enter a trance to receive prophecy, Bnei Israel's physical selves were silenced so their souls would truly receive the revelation. So why all this noise and drama? Why didn't Hashem simply declare that from then on, all the mitzvos our forefathers had observed are obligatory for the Jewish people, as well as for future generations, as it is written, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Morasha Keilat Yaakov, that the Torah is also a legacy for future generations. And then, if necessary, only new mitzvos would be added. The lesson we learn from this is that Torah and Mitzvos are not merely a code of law. They are meant to refine us and to elevate the spirit over the physical. So now let's explain the order of things. In terms of setting aside Jews from Gentiles, Bnei Israel already displayed noble traits. Avram's hospitality, Rivka's kindness, Rachel and Leah's selflessness, Joseph's forgiveness, the courage of the midwives in Mitzrayim, and so on. At Marah, they received laws, and even Para Aduma, the red heifer, which is a law beyond understanding, which shows that we're already spiritually prepared to fulfill commandments whose reasons were hidden and beyond their comprehension. But Sinai was a cosmic revolution, removing the barrier between the spiritual and the physical, where divine revelation came first and laws only afterwards. What change did it bring about? After Matan Torah, we observe Mishpatim not because they make sense, but because Hashem commanded them. Even the wisest and most righteous people can be influenced by their own inclinations, emotions, or personal interests. Only when a command comes from Hashem does it guide us beyond our natural biases. Think about how today people are so much focused on influence and followers on social media. They often judge someone's value by how many followers they have, so much so that many even measure their own worth by the number of their followers on social media. That is not a Jewish approach. Our goal is fulfilling Hashem's will, not self-promotion. I'd like to illustrate this with a story. A crowd of Hasidim in Radomsk once approached Rabbi Shlomo, a revered and saintly rabbi, wishing to crown him as their Rebbe. Yet he refused to accept this position, saying, I've told you over and over again that I'm neither a tzaddik nor a Torah scholar. As the argument continued, an elderly person spoke up. Rebbe, according to the Torah, where there are many and few, the majority rules. We, he said, are the majority, and you are the minority, so you must accept our decision. To this, Rabbi Shlomo agreed and reluctantly accepted the appointment, but he responded with a verse from Tehillim 69, Atah yadata li'ivalti v'ashmotai. You, Hashem, know my misgivings. But the verse goes on to say, Al yevoshu v'krevecha, may those who trust in you not be ashamed of me, referring to those Hasidim that have just appointed him as the Rebbe. This verse of Tehillim he recited not only reflected his humility, but he also realized that he needs Hashem's help at his side at all times. This story presents a strikingly different and praiseworthy approach compared with many so-called influencers of today, those who seek followers purely for their own selfish promotion. So how does this connect to the lesson of Matan Torah with the thunder, lightning, and the loud blast of the shofar? Just as the revelation at Mount Sinai silenced the bodily and earthly aspects of Jews, it teaches us the same lesson today. We, too, must let our spirituality guide our thoughts and actions. This gives us the strength to rise above our physical limitations. How? By consciously shutting down our physical impulses, shouting them down. Just as the heavenly noise and powerful revelation stunned and silenced the entire world, leaving no room for anything that could negate this visible spiritual reality, so that our spiritual inclinations can truly govern our decisions and acts. The incident I brought involving Rabbi Shlomo of Radomsk illustrates that the same action, in this case leading a group of people, may in some cases be perfectly positive. Yet the rabbi wished to reject this position because of his awareness of the great responsibility involved. While nowadays the accumulation of followers seems to be promoted, and in many cases not with praiseworthy intents. At Sinai, we witnessed the first part of removing the barriers. Hashem came down, making a profound display so that the spiritual could overwhelm the physical. The second part is our task. We must rise to meet him. When we gain this awareness and overcome our inner selfish impulses, shutting down the physical tendencies that live in us, we begin to climb spiritually, reaching up to greet Hashem. This allows us to emulate his actions even beyond the strict letter of the law. For example, Hashem commands in this Parsha to return a poor man's garment every night, even if it was justly taken as a collateral for an unpaid loan. Why? He says, because I am merciful. By following this path, we contribute our part in Hashem's plan, breaking the barriers between the physical and the spiritual. So let's bring the spiritual emulation of Hashem into everyday life. Imagine your neighbor starts building an extra room in a disputed area between your apartments. Of course you're angry. You might want to confront him and even sue him. But then you learn that the room is designated for his elderly mother, who needs daily care and has nowhere else to go. Now, if your spiritual self takes the lead, you pause your anger, choose compromise, and maybe even gain another section of shared property. In that moment, you are emulating Hashem's declaration, I am merciful, going beyond the strict letter of the law. And your benefits don't stop there. You gain peace of mind, you fix relations with your neighbor, and you've invested in long-term harmony. So if we are attentive to it, the mountain's echo can live within us, thunder, shofar, and all, quieting our physical, egotistical inclinations and making way for elevating our thoughts and actions in everyday life.